guided cemetery tour will be held in Springfield. The event honoring the legacy of the American Revolution and Springfield's contribution in the war and on the home front.
Western Mass News reporter Addie Patterson has more on the event.
It's just fascinating to us, the history of Springfield and the various people that are quite famous.
On Monday, May 18th, the Springfield Preservation Trust will host Voices from the Grave Heroes of the American Revolution Cemetery Tour at the Springfield Cemetery on Maple Street. The tour, which is led by costumed interpreters, gives attendees an inside look at the lives of the people who helped shape Springfield's revolutionary history.
We get to learn about them and portray them like they're real people still. It's just such a delightful and an honor to do this.
Western Mass News caught up with tour guides Elizabeth and Michael Stevens ahead of Sunday's tour. They tell us it's exciting conducting these tours, learning about the rich history the city has to offer.
Some of which is just, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. There's another thing about Springfield I didn't know.
We also spoke with President of the Springfield Preservation Trust, Erica Swallow. She tells Western Mass News why this tour stands out in the city of Springfield.
But you're going to be led from grave to grave and actually see these costume interpreters in first person acting out as if they are these people from the past. There's not a lot of opportunities in Springfield to see costume docenting.
Others telling us why it's important to support organizations like the Preservation Trust and the events they put on.
The history of Springfield is reflected in the environment that we have around us, and it's important to preserve as much as possible the buildings and the other public structures that we have, so that we have an appreciation of the past, and it helps us to live into the future.
Reporting in Springfield, Addie Patterson, Western Mass News.
For more information on the Springfield Preservation Trust or to purchase tickets for this upcoming event, you can head to our website, westernmassnews.com.